How was the trip?
So amazing.
So you got to know each other. So, back to truth and lying. So what if you say you're going to do something? Where are you going? I'm going shopping. Do you have to go shopping? You say you were going shopping. Why is that not a lie? When you say you're going to do something, what does that mean? We're prophets? You're predicting the future? When you say you're going to do something, what it means is, I intend on doing this. So the way we would determine whether or not that statement is true is by your intent at the time you say it. Right? So if you say, I'm going shopping, but you really weren't going shopping, and then you get a guilty conscience, you say, no, I lied. So you go shopping. Have you accomplished anything? Nothing. The statement, I'm going shopping, is communicating that you want to go shopping. You didn't want to go shopping. You didn't intend on going shopping. Changing your mind later and going shopping doesn't really correct the fact that you were dishonest when you said you were going shopping. So, based on the halachas we learned last time, if someone's trying to find out where you're going and it's none of their business, so you tell them you're going shopping, that'll be permissible. Because you're outsmarting someone who is trying to extort information from you they don't deserve. But that'll be the regular rules of truth and lying that we did before. So again, when we're talking about the future, this is not a prediction, this is not a prophecy, this is a statement of intent. The truth or falsehood of that statement is determined by your intent when you made the statement. However, there are different kinds of situations where you would actually have to carry it out. The first one is when you say you are going to do something and that something is a mitzvah. The Gemara tells us that simply making a statement, I'm about to do a mitzvah, is considered a vow. That's a neder. So, when a person says, I'm going to give this amount of money to charity, that is called a neder tzedakah. They've got to follow through. But it's not limited to tzedakah. It is true of anything that is a mitzvah. Now, included in mitzvah is any favor that you're going to do for someone who's in need. So there, the definition could be a little fuzzy. I mean, doing a friend a favor may very well be a mitzvah. You see, this is where the ancient Jewish custom of saying bli neder all the time came from. That if you say you're going to do something and it could possibly be considered a mitzvah, you don't want to be stuck with a neder, and then you can't change your mind. But people who say bli neder about everything, that is a bit funny. The term bli neder is something you say when you make a statement that involves a mitzvah. Okay. Now we go further. The Gemara tells us, if you tell someone, oh, I'm going to get you this and this, and others are going to give them a gift. If it is inexpensive, you do have to give it to them. And if you don't, you are considered what is called mechusar amana, which is unreliable. In what way you're considered unreliable? Like what are the consequences? In the days where there was a local Beit Din, they would announce, you are unreliable. Today it's only announced in heaven. Not a good thing. Why is this? If it is something inexpensive, they relied on you. And they have the right to rely on you. If it's something expensive, so although it's nice to be able to trust people all the time, but it's also a bit naive. Whereas if you say you're going to give someone something inexpensive, it's understood that they will rely on you because it's not a big deal. Once they rely on you, there's a requirement that you follow through. And again, if you don't, you're considered unreliable. When you look around the poskim, they take this very seriously. What about something that's expensive? No. You can change your mind. Unless you said, I promise. Now, promise is not a vow. It's not a neder. A promise is what is called a havtacha. Literally a promise in Hebrew. In modern Hebrew, you say, ani mafticha, I promise. There you have to follow through. Even though it's something expensive. This is the case when we're dealing with an object. When we're dealing with anything you say you're going to do for another person. If it's a minor, it calls for a minor amount of exertion. You're supposed to do it. If it's something major, if you said, I promise, you have to. If not, you don't have to. And the difference between minor and major is, do they have the right to rely on you or are they naive? But if you say, I promise, they have the right to rely on you. The Gemara teaches us that there is one exception where even if it is something major that you said you would do and you didn't say, I promise, you have to follow through, and that's when you're dealing with children. Children do rely on you, even if it's something major. You are not allowed to tell a child, I'm going to give you something, and not follow through. For parents to go say to a child, you do this, I'll give you that, and change their minds is not permissible. Now, first of all of this is in everyday life. But it also applies to business. You agree to buy something, you agree to sell something, you agree to, and then in Yerushalayim, this is a common question, comes up all the time. When it comes to childcare, woman's got a 2-year-old. So there's a woman across the street, has a play group, that's what they call it for 2-year-olds. It's really daycare, but, and you say, yes, I'm going to be sending next year. Then the neighbor next door says that she's opening a play group. But you already told the one across the street that you're going to be sending your kid there. But now something changed. Are you allowed to change your mind? Now, in halacha, this is considered a small gift because you're not really giving a gift. You're taking a service and you're going to be paying for it. That's not what we call major exertion or a major expense. Wherever you send your kid, you're going to have to pay. So, based on what we learned, you are not allowed to change your mind. There is an opinion in the Rishonim that if circumstances change, then you are allowed to back out. In this case, they did. What is the halacha? Two opinions, of course, all the way down. There is no clear halacha in this case. The poskim say that we are dealing with something very severe. Therefore, if you really do want to back out, you should really ask the woman across the street for forgiveness. Tell her, listen, the circumstances change, you understand. It's obvious that it's so much more convenient to have someone next door than to have to get my kid across the street. If she refuses to forgive, she doesn't forego, she insists you send the kid there. So no one can stop you. You're allowed to change your mind because there is one such opinion. But you are taking a chance. This is something very severe. For all you know, they announced up in heaven that you're unreliable. A couple of common examples that go on here. People have a guest room. So a neighbor says, I have guests that want to come for Shabbos. Can they stay in your guest room? Yes. And then your own family member calls and asks, can I stay? Can I come and stay? They want to join you for Shabbos and stay in the guest room. So the circumstances changed. What you're really supposed to do is tell the first one, listen, circumstances changed. I feel very bad about this. Could you please be mochel me? Could you forgive me? Could you forgo? But we don't take this lightly. Yet one more time, letting someone use your guest room is not a major expense. Doesn't cost anything. Therefore, you couldn't change your mind. One more time, according to this one opinion, since circumstances changed, it would be permissible. So I mentioned that this is true in business. Your negotiations and you agree to sell something at a certain price and then realize that the price went up right after that. So here too, you said you were going to sell at a certain price. This is considered a commitment. You're unreliable if you back out or you want to change the terms. But the price went up. Now in business, you ask people for forgiveness. It doesn't especially work. It's a very cruel world out there. People are not so quick to forgive. What do? Depending on what kind of business we're talking about, this can involve a lot of money. If you want to rely on those who are lenient, you can. Since circumstances have changed. Now understand, this is only when circumstances have changed. If nothing changed, you just had second thoughts, there you can back out. There was a situation in my neighborhood where a family was planning on moving. So they sold their apartment, but they didn't really sell it yet. Negotiations were done. The lawyers were writing up the contract. And then they decided, we like this neighborhood, we're not moving. Their halach is they cannot change their mind unless the buyer is willing to be mochel. Because circumstances did not change. They just changed their minds. That's not acceptable. Now, if they do back out, they backed out, but they're considered unreliable. And again, you take this very seriously. The case here was they backed out. The buyer was quite upset, but decided to be mochel. He stayed there, and then the buyer got a better deal next door. It's actually happened. So I don't know what kind of business you do today. But this is something you've got to know. I am sure there are going to be situations where you agree to something and then you have reason to change your mind, and you have to remember, if it's only that you change your mind, you can't do that. If it's that circumstances really changed, although ideally you should get the other ones to be mochel, if they refuse to, and it makes a difference, you have them to rely on. Now, at what point can you not change your mind even if you're willing to be called unreliable? So in halacha, we have the concept of a kinyan. Kinyan is an act of acquisition. When you buy something, when does it become yours? You go shopping, you fill your shopping cart. I don't mean virtually. Literally, you're walking into an actual physical supermarket. You fill your shopping cart. Anything in there is not yours, right? It all belongs to them still. At what point does it become yours? So for example, yeah. But at what point, when you pick it up in the supermarket, after you pay for it, so that they're allowing you to acquire it, which means that as you're shopping, say you picked up a snack, can you break it in half and eat half of it? It's not yours yet. It's not yours yet. And that's something else that's a little funny. If someone takes something out of your shopping cart, right, you got the last box of cereal. And when you're not looking, someone takes that out of your shopping cart. Have they stolen from you? No. It's wicked. They brought other stuff. We'll be learning all about that. But they haven't stolen from you because it's not yours. So it still belongs to the supermarket, and they're going to pay the supermarket. What they did was terrible, but it's not theft. Yeah.
So if you're in the supermarket and you're really hungry, you can't eat an apple with the intention you're going to pay for it?
You don't have to ask them permission, it's theirs. Until you pay for it and actually lift it afterwards, it's not yours. Now, min haTorah, all portable objects are acquired by lifting them after you pay for them, or after the owner allows you to lift it and make it yours, and he says you can pay tomorrow. What if you paid for it and didn't lift it? So here we have an interesting situation. Min haTorah, paying for it is already an act of acquisition. It's yours. But the rabbis lifted that. What they said was it doesn't work for a very simple reason. Because this means that someone else, you paid for an object. You didn't see it, you didn't get it. Which means that another person is holding on to your object. You have no idea where it is or what it is. He can always come back later and say, there was a fire and it burned. Therefore, the rabbis made it that it's still his, so it's his responsibility and he'll take care of it. However, they said that anybody that pays for an object and then backs out receives what is referred to as misha para, which is a curse, where Bein Adam will get up and declare, he who paid Paro and all the other wicked for their deeds should also punish all of those who do not stand by their word. This is bad. This is Misha Para, which is a very bad thing. Let's see. So we have Mechusar Amana, Misha Para, and then an actual Kinyan. Mechusar Amana means you're considered unreliable, but that's if it's that you tell someone you're going to give them something small, or you promise them you'll give something big, or you tell a child that you're going to give them something, even if it's something big. If there was actually a transfer of money, that's Misha Para. If you actually acquired it, then it's already yours or theirs if they acquired it, and then changing it afterwards is simple theft. Yeah.
Where does returning things come into this?
Now, all of this is when there is no policy. A store has a policy. Can return for 14 days. A country has a policy. Legally in Israel, every store has to give you 14 days to return anything and you get your money back. Except for those things that they don't take back. Medicine, food. They don't have to process food for sure. They do not have to accept it unless it's packaged. No, it's a box of something. If that's the rule, be it the rule of the country, be it the rule of the particular establishment, then you go by the rule. So they have to give it back. You can change your mind. However, this only works if you really changed your mind. It is usher. It is usher. It is absolutely prohibited to go and buy something with the intent of using it once and then returning it. This is not uncommon when it comes to clothing. There's some event, someone's wedding, you don't feel like buying a gown. So you buy it and return it. That's not what they had in mind. Returning it is if you change your mind. Returning it is not that you bought it with the intent of doing so, of returning it in the first place. That is absolutely prohibited. Now, another one is a deposit. If there's a non-refundable deposit, then if you're willing to forfeit the deposit, you can back out. Because that's what a deposit is all about. They're telling you, you can change your mind, but this is what it's going to cost you. So a deposit does not count to turn it into Misha Para. Does not count into turning that something where you can't change your mind. So here we've been talking about objects. The same goes for a service. There things can get more complicated, but let me give some basic rules. You make reservations, be it a restaurant, be it a hotel, and you back out. So if they have a policy, you can back out up until 24 or 48 hours before. Or they say that if you back out after that time, you lose your deposit. Okay. But if they don't have a policy, are you allowed to back out? So if circumstances didn't change, you're not supposed to back out. The regular rules. If circumstances change, you're allowed to, but don't do it unless you really have to. The additional rule here is if you cause them a financial loss. This is something they would have to prove. But for example, you hired a tour guide. You know, in Israel, this is common. Families come here, they hire a tour guide. And then they decide they want to change their minds. This tour guide turned down, another request for the same time because they already booked with you. Now that you backed out, whoever it was that tried booking them in the first place, now already found somebody else. Had you not booked them, they would have had another customer. So you caused them a loss. You would have to pay for that loss. But they would have to prove that. They would have to prove that, A, they had other offers that they turned down. They'd have to show that. And that B, they can't get anyone now at this point. They'd have to prove both of them. Which is not always possible. But you really have to take these things seriously. Especially for when people are touring. They make plans, they change their minds, and it just doesn't occur to them that this is at the expense of all sorts of people. Theoretically, a hotel can do the same thing with a booking. They can say that they were really filled to capacity. People had asked, people had tried to come and they said that everything was booked. And now that you pulled out, they can't get anyone to fill the room. The room's empty because of you. You've got to pay for it. Yeah.
This is like a bit like extravagant, but like how does this fall into play with like airlines when they overbook flights and then say that you can't get on the plane after you purchase a ticket?
So first of all, I think we've come to terms with the culture, which means that in practice, every time you book a flight, you understand there's a chance you're going to get bumped. That's the way it works today. In this day and age, you'll either get bumped or the flight will get canceled. And between the two of them, there's a good chance that you're not going to fly at the time that you booked to fly. So it's a little bit different. But as far as the airline doing it, really, they should be reimbursing you for whatever they cost. Many airlines do. They'll put you up somewhere overnight if the next flight is a night later. Yeah.
So if you said you wanted to go shopping and you genuinely had the intention to go, and then you decide not to go for whatever reason, you're still held accountable.
You're okay.
Oh, you are.
You're okay.
Oh, because the circumstances changed.
Remember, that's the first case. There's nobody relying on you. Right? No one's relying on you. Whatever you said was true. You're allowed to change your mind.
If someone's relying on you,
if someone's relying, you tell them, I'm going shopping, I'll get this for you. They're relying on you. So there you have to get what changed? You didn't go shopping. Right? What changed was something came up and you didn't go shopping. So you've got to get their mechila, otherwise you've got a problem because you promised them that you would get them then. And it's not a major thing unless we're talking about going shopping in some faraway place. Yeah.
If that's the babysitting place, if a better offer is right next door to you, and you said that circumstances change, then it's different. But aren't you also isn't that also a mitzvah because you're giving them chesed by giving them parnasa?
Yeah, business is business. Even though all business could possibly be a chesed, but business is business. Yeah.
What if it's the store's intention to have people buy things that they know that the people think they're going to return later the next day or something like that, because they know a lot of people don't return the things they intend to return? Then are you allowed to fall into their trap?
In theory, yes, but you've got to know that's the way the industry works. I don't think that's true of gowns.
Right.
Yeah.
About the daycare thing, isn't it a problem if two businesses of the same thing open up so close to each other?
That's another sugya we will be studying. That's very important. In practice, it's not a problem. It's not a problem if you're dealing with a neighborhood where there are lots of little kids. If you're dealing with a place where there's the sum total of 4 infants, and then you have 3 people opening up, that's not good. Because someone is not going to survive. Whoever opened first should really win. Yeah.
How do you know if
you're being like held accountable to Shemaim for Mishapara or Mechsura, because there's no basis to announce it to you.
How do you know you've got to know if you were right or wrong. In the case of Mechusar Amana, the one case we don't know about is if circumstances change, and we really don't know. So you don't take a chance unless you have to, unless it's really a major loss. In terms of Mishapara, once the money was given, unless there were conditions, again, unless they clearly have a policy that you can back out, but you have to pay some kind of penalty, then you don't back out. Yeah.
When there's like that parenting technique that they tell the children that they're going to do something for them, but then the child's too young, they're going to remember in like 20 minutes. So to stop a tantrum, is that like from school?
No. And by the way, that's not the educational way to stop a tantrum.
Like, why isn't that not?
What you're doing is you're showing them it pays to stop a tantrum. It pays to have a tantrum. Because then you promise something. You're paying them for having a tantrum. Kids have to learn that you ignore tantrums, that they don't get your attention for a tantrum. Then they'll stop having tantrums because they don't accomplish anything. Yeah.
What if the buying the house issue was the other way around and the buyer goes down in the situation because that's causing the person a lot of financial loss, but technically they're bad?
Did they know about it at the time or something changed? So for example, someone negotiated on buying a house. Negotiations can take months. It could be that in the interim, the prices of real estate in the neighborhood drastically went down. And at that point, they can actually back out because it was a change.
They're like escrow or whatever, and then they back out.
The halacha is that unless there was an actual kinyan. So by the time they put money in escrow, there's usually a kinyan. There's usually some kind of if they don't actually sign a document, the initial one, they do things in stages. There's usually some kind of kinyan that takes place beforehand, and they really can't back out. And if they do, first of all, the other people can sue you in court and in halacha too. They really can't back out anymore. Once there's a kinyan, one of the kinyanim is very funny, but in Israel this is the way it's done from people. One kinyan that takes effect is the kinyan of giving an object to one another. Meaning the buyer will give a pen to the seller by which the seller is committing to sell it. The seller will give the buyer a pen, and by that the buyer is committing that he's going to buy it. Once you do that, there's a commitment, and that's a kinyan. That's an active acquisition. You don't own the house yet, but you own the responsibility of buying or selling it. That's a real kinyan, and you can't back out of that anymore. That's past Mishapara. That's a real kinyan. You are required to do this. Okay, now there are a lot of other halachas that we're going to have to be learning. For example, with workers, with renting an apartment where you rent it, pay for it, and then change your mind about going. This happens here. Unfortunately, it's so common. People they'll book accommodations here, and then the security situation deteriorates and people don't come. Do they get their money back or not? This is what they paid already. Do they get their money back or not? So that get quite complicated. The basic rule is that when you're talking about renting something, renting an apartment, renting a hotel room, then as soon as you give the money, that hotel room is yours for the time that was specified. If you don't show up, it's still yours. Whether or not you make use of it, for that amount of time, it was yours. So if you paid already, once you pay for the room, that room is yours. If you don't show up, you don't get your money back. It was yours for that amount of time. You didn't use it. You chose not to use it. The only time that there's something to discuss is when you're dealing with something like a security situation, which is a very complicated sugya in halacha known as makat medina, which means that the whole country suffered. This was not an individual decision, but this is something that hit everybody equally. And there are two opinions. There's one opinion that when it comes to makat medina, you can always change your mind, and the other one is that you can't. This was during COVID, especially in the beginning. That very first Pesach, and people had booked for the summer too. And there were no flights. You just couldn't get, there were no flights anywhere. You just couldn't go anywhere. Do you pay? Do you not have to pay? So I shouldn't say that. Do you get your money back? Do you not get your money back? If you paid already. If you didn't pay, you don't have to pay. That ended up being that there were so many complicated cases for example, people that rented apartments here, they flew home for Pesach. The last flight was like a day after Purim or 2 days after Purim, something like that. And then they couldn't come back for months. They were required to pay rent for all of those months. It was still their apartment. Yeah.
Are the people who own it allowed to rent it out to someone else?
If they do, then they can't collect twice. And they have to get permission from the first renters. But of course, the first renters would prefer that because someone else is paying for them. The only problem is that they have all their stuff there. A similar thing came for.
For a non-Jew, are they also deemed unreliable and held accountable?
Non-Jews are not held responsible for our halachas.
In Shalim?
In Shemayim, they're held accountable for the law of the land.
So
And of course their own integrity when they're being dishonest. But otherwise it goes by the law of the land. For non-Jews, it goes totally by the law of the land. Whatever the rule is legally. It's very interesting. In Israeli law, they've adopted a lot of halacha in business. They've adopted a lot of halacha, not everything. Much of their law is still based on the English law from the days of the mandate. But there are many things that they took from halacha and incorporate them into actual laws here. In fact, to be a lawyer in Israel, you've got to know quite a bit of Gemara. At least translated into Hebrew. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it here. There are many more cases, but I'm afraid that it's going to get too complicated. So we'll leave it here. Any more questions, cases? But really digest this because this is extremely pertinent. Yeah.
So in Corona, were people able to get their money? I'm saying in that case, people were able to get their money back, or
they couldn't get their money back. No, they could not get their money back. The reason was because when they left, they knew there was such a chance. As far as the people that booked and paid, you're asking for the people who booked and paid.
Booked and paid and then couldn't go.
Booked and paid and couldn't go. So that was already a question that was dependent on the two opinions. It was a question of the two opinions of what happens in the case of Makat Medina, and in most cases they couldn't get their money back because the person holding on to it doesn't have to give it. Yeah.
So if you decide to switch gods because the circumstances change, and you ask for forgiveness and they forgive you, you're good.
You're good. Yeah, you're fine up in heaven.
And if you don't, then you're not.
If you don't,
then they don't forgive you.
And the circumstances change, you don't know. When you get up there, you'll find out.
And if the circumstances don't change, you just don't like the God or whatever.
Then if they'll forgive you, you're fine. If they don't forgive you, you are not fine.
So you only wouldn't be fine if you ask for forgiveness, even if the circumstances changed. You ask.
No, again, one more time. The circumstances did not change, but you changed your mind.
Oh.
There, you cannot back out. unless they forgive you. In the case where circumstances change, there are two opinions. You're allowed to back out, but you should get their forgiveness because we don't know what the halacha is up in heaven. All right, yeah.
Are these only applied to when you interact with Jewish-owned business, or?
This is all when you interact with Jews. When you interact with non-Jews, the rules are according to the law of the land. Yeah. You should be very careful about changing your mind when you're dealing with a non-Jew. It can often cause a chilul Hashem. Yeah.
What's the line between like your mind being changed and like the circumstances being changed? Because I feel like once your mind is changed, it had that happen because of something. Like, when is it because of the circumstances?
Circumstances mean circumstances that directly involve the issue at hand. You know, not that you're not that so many things are happening in the country, or you just don't feel like it. You know?
Like, would your mood, like, if like you told your friend like, oh, I'll go out to dinner with you, like, but then you just became sad and you're like, actually I'm not in the mood to go out. Would that be like a circumstance being changed?
For going out to dinner, yes, because that's something that directly affects it. For buying an apartment, no.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
But finding out information about whatever you were going to get into, that's a change in circumstance.
That is not. You have to do your homework before you make decisions. It's only if something actually changed. The prices went up, the prices went down. Someone else opened up, someone opened the gun next to you. It's got to be that circumstances really changed. The fact that you did not do your due diligence, that does not mean it changed. All right. Okay, fine. So you got to study this. Yeah. Okay.